Christine is a very good friend of mine, and I'm so happy that she agreed to join us this morning. She is of French, Swiss, and Filipino descent, so I have that common thing with her as the Filipino side of us. But she's also a wonderful social entrepreneur. She's an adventurer. She's an author. She's a keynote speaker. She's a mom of 4, you name it, right? And she's been a passionate champion for women empowerment and environmental conservation for as long as I've known her. And that she didn't just set up one NGO, she set up 2 NGOs, co-set up one, Women on a Mission, and then founded Her Planet Earth more recently. And these are 2 award-winning NGOs that takes all-female teams on pioneering expeditions to support worthy causes. And that's what we'll hear about from her today. It's really that brand of ecofeminism that she'll talk about, how she combines the 2. But more recently, she's also been supporting Eat Just, as they launch their lab-grown chicken here in Singapore. So we're talking about ecofeminism and cellular agriculture, and very, very pleased to welcome to WOMAG Christine Amour-Levar.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. Such a pleasure to be here, and a warm good morning to the WOMAG community, and I'm delighted to be invited and to speak to you today.
So Christine, let's get started. I think the first thing everybody wants to ask is, how does anyone come up with the 2 NGOs you did? Women on a Mission first, which is what, almost 9 years ago, and then Her Planet Earth. What inspired you to start Women on a Mission with your co-founder?
So I think that, honestly, the journey probably started a little bit before we met as a team in terms of my co-founders. Like you, Elizabeth, I grew up in the Philippines and was aware of inequality and poverty at a very early age. I think that's definitely something that stayed with me as I grew up and developed my career around the world, which was mostly in sports marketing. I worked for Nike in different parts of the world before coming to Singapore to work for them. And then, of course, it was a chance encounter with one of my co-founders as she was about to set off for an incredible trip. So I bumped into her. Actually, it's a cute story. I bumped into her on the streets of Singapore one day, and she said to me, "I'm about to go off for 7 weeks." And I thought, "Wow, where are you going? Are you going on a holiday to the south of France?" And she said, "Actually, no, I'm going to try to climb Everest." And that kind of just blew me away. You don't meet women like that every day. And, I had read a lot about climbing, and I knew how dangerous Everest was, and I had read Into Thin Air by John Krakauer 3 times. I don't know if some of you have seen the film Everest. So anyway, so she succeeded on the first try. And I'd love to show this picture that I sent over this morning with the group. And on the summit of Everest, she had this banner that said, "Bearing the flag for women everywhere," in support of a charity that she had been working with in London for many years called Women for Women International. And me watching this from Singapore, looking at all the pictures later on as she came down, it really impacted me. And it also came at a time in my life where I felt that I wanted to do more, to support other women in need. I'd been so lucky growing up in a loving home, had a chance at a good education, had so many opportunities in my career. And so it really came from a place of gratitude, where we started talking, Valerie and me, and saying, what is this charity? Tell me more about it. And they support women survivors of war around the world. It's a beautiful charity that's over 20 years old. They work with women in Rwanda and Afghanistan and Iraq and Democratic Republic of Congo, and take the most marginalized women and put them through a 1-year program to help them stand on their feet. And so obviously something in me just said, I need to support this. I need to use my skills and experience to do this and try to find a way to help these women that are not as lucky as me. And so that's how we came up with Women on a Mission. We decided to combine our passion for sports and adventure with our corporate knowledge and background, and developed an NGO here in Singapore, got a group of women to come with us to Everest Base Camp. So we didn't go all the way to the summit, which is a much more dangerous climb, but we trekked to Everest Base Camp, and we raised $150,000 for this charity. And we set up, we had a fundraising event, and we joined as a team. We got team jackets. We got written up in the Straits Times. We did an interview on the radio in Singapore with Michelle Martin, a local VJ, and she decided to come with us at the end of the interview. It was kind of contagious, the enthusiasm that we had. And so this is how Women on a Mission was born. We did this first trek, and then women were contacting us after that saying, when is the next expedition? I want to join. And this gave a lot of meaning to my life personally. It really was transformational. in many ways, that you felt that you could get a group of women together, just regular women with different careers, all friends. Most of us were just friends. And create a story, create a brand around women on a mission, and really move things a little bit, and find out more about people who are just not as lucky as us. It gave us a real strong sense of meaning. And so this is how we started that. And 9 years later, and over a million US dollars raised with that charities, with that first NGO. And the journey has just been one of the funnest and most meaningful things I've done in my life.
What about Her Planet Earth, the second one, which you set up more recently? How is that different?
Yeah. So, through what was happening through Women on a Mission, I discovered and I learned so much about the issues that women were facing around the world. We were asked to do talks and join workshops and work with different charities around the world, because Women for Women International was just the first charity we started working with. We got involved with AWARE in Singapore, AWARE Singapore. UN Women was still in Singapore at the time. Now it's called United Women. So just learning about the issues that women face, I realized that women are always the most impacted by crisis and poverty and climate change. And so when I started realizing that, I did more research around what was happening to women and climate change, what was the connection? And I realized that we were intrinsically linked as well. And that, because in many countries, women hold most of the agricultural roles, anytime climate, changes and shifts, again, they suffer the brunt of what's happening with climate change. And so instead of trying to do everything with Women on a Mission, I decided to join another group of women, different women who are mostly millennials, younger than me, and who were deeply passionate about doing something for the environment. And this is how we came up with Her Planet Earth. So much more of an environmental focus, working with different NGOs in the space, again, focused on women empowerment, and also using marketing events and expeditions around the world to raise funds, because this is something I knew how to do, and I was good at it, and it appealed to my sense of adventure. And I had developed quite a bit of experience doing that, taking women safely out of their comfort zones around the world. And so this is why I set up Her Planet Earth, a completely separate NGO, both registered in Singapore with different partners, once again, all women supporting other women.
Christine, lest everyone start thinking that this are like your average holiday out of Singapore, let's show them a video to give them an idea of exactly what you mean by these pioneering expeditions that you take. And we'll come back to that. Can you show us the video? Amazing. 16 expeditions and $1.5 million between those two. Amazing contribution, Christine. And let's talk a little bit more about that, about some of those expeditions. In particular, I remember you talking about the one, for example, in Siberia, when you were on an amphibious vehicle with such a challenging expedition. I'd like you to think about times when you were really pushed out of your comfort zone, you said, right? And when you were really, probably feeling unsafe too in some of those conditions. Can you recount like some of the more exciting times of your expedition?
Well, we've had a few hair-raising moments. My mom always says to me, can you please tell me after it's done? Don't tell me before you go. We've had a few. I mean, obviously I'm in charge of the organization. And so I partner with with expedition tour operators that are very experienced, and I'm ensure that this is something that's very safe, as safe as possible. And actually, we work with ex-British military officers who fought in Afghanistan, and when we've gone to places like even Greenland or Iran. But yeah, of course, as you know, when you travel and you go on these kind of trips, there's always unexpected situations that happen, things that you can control, and usually it's something to do with the weather or an injury or somebody not feeling well. But other times they're just completely out of your planning mode, and yeah, things happen and have taught me a lot about myself and about leadership and about caring for my team, because I've taken over 150 women on expeditions now around the world. With different levels of fitness, all ages, from 22 years old to 60 years old. Some of them are CEOs of top companies, and others are stay-at-home moms, and just amazing women, all of them, who are so brave and wanting to do more. So, I could tell you the story. In Siberia, it was an interesting one, because we were on our way to migrate with Nenet reindeer herders. So these are one of the oldest, the world's oldest nomads. They are people from the north of Siberia who travel with 10,000 reindeer. When the winter comes, they go south. And we wanted to be the first team of women to ever travel and migrate with a group like that, who live off reindeer, raw reindeer meat and blood. That's why you saw in the video. We all drank raw meat, raw blood, and tasted raw meat, and just to be respectful of their culture. But on the way there, something quite unusual happened. We were all piled up in a Russian military type van, and we were traveling on an icy river for about 5 or 6 hours when the ice cracked and the van plunged into the freezing river. And we honestly thought we were all going to die, and I thought, my God, is this how it ends for me? My 4 kids and my husband at home in Singapore, and what am I doing here? And luckily, the vehicle ended up being lodged on the ice and had some huge wheels that caused it to float. So we didn't sink to the bottom. But in the first few seconds of that crash, there was a range of experience from my teammates screaming and trying and panicking and reacting in different ways, to myself going very, very quiet and having very moist palms. And actually, I realized I reached out for something next to my legs, and I realized how calm I was under pressure, even though I became very quiet. I reached out for my passport and put it in my pocket. In times of crisis, here I was, the total planner again, in case I got out of it. And so we've had a range of experiences. We had a time in Iran where our guide went missing and lost in the desert. He actually wandered off and had a bit of a moment, and we had to look for him and had to evacuate him under medical conditions. He was severely dehydrated. So all in those situations, you really have to manage your team, make sure everybody stays calm and supports each other. So it teaches you so much about empathy and compassion, and really, humility as well, because when you make mistakes, when you organize these trips, they have severe consequences. Like what happened to us once in Ethiopia. We were in the hottest place on earth, the Danakil Depression, and 70% of the team got heat stroke, which is quite serious because of poor planning on my part. To be honest, we biked much too long in a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius, which is too hot to be biking at that temperature, and we're 5 hours away from a hospital. So things like that, they are. We are careful not to put people at risk, and of course we do the best planning, but there are situations that you can't all control. So it's been a humbling experience, to say the least. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, what I remember hearing from you and some of your other women on the expedition is really what they learn about themselves and how they would respond in a crisis, as you said, but also the physical training and that you put them through. And so we all respond to different challenges like that, both the physical and maybe the more emotional one in the crisis situations that you might find yourself. So it's great to also hear that it wasn't just a physical kind of expedition challenging, but also for them.
Yeah, the mental, the emotional and the mental preparation for an expedition like that takes 9 months. Sometimes I get my team together a year to 12 months before. We learn about the culture of where we're going. We work very closely around the fundraising, because we're fundraising for different causes supporting women. And each expedition is customized and tailored very uniquely. And then, of course, working as a team, getting to know your team, because some of them are not all in Singapore. So we're abroad, we're connecting on WhatsApp like 9 months before. Yeah, a lot of mental, emotional preparation. Different expeditions have different physical challenges and different mental and emotional challenges as well.
So Christine, let's go to the beneficiaries though, because you've had a chance, every expedition, I know your team meets with the beneficiaries, and some of them have been some of these women in particular in agricultural communities, you know, whether they're in the Philippines or in somewhere in Europe or in more remote places. Tell us about what you do when you meet with them and what some of the things that you've learned about meeting some of the women.
So one of the key priorities for my expeditions is any country where we go and trek, we want to meet with women's groups and especially indigenous people, because it's part of the rich cultural experience and also part of our mission to connect with women, understand their issues in those countries. Obviously, Women on a Mission is much more focused on supporting women who are affected by violence and abuse, so war, domestic abuse, human trafficking. And Her Planet Earth, as I mentioned, is much more focused on women who are feeling the brunt of climate change. And so when we trek in different parts of the world, in particular in Asia, as I mentioned, where women are in the vast majority of roles are actually agricultural roles are held by women in Asia in particular. You know, we go to some of those communities and we try to understand some of the issues they're facing, but we also work with local NGOs like UN Women who have programs, agricultural programs in place to help women switch from crops that are more climate change resilient. So some specific examples would be mountainous areas where women are actually dealing with soil erosion and trying to support them with other crops like peanuts that might be more climate change resilient, or in other parts, especially Vietnam, Bangladesh, Nepal, where there could be flooding in some parts of the year where they can't grow rice. So we switch them to lotus as well, which is quite lucrative as well in terms of a local crop that can be sold in their community. So it's really about helping them build stronger livelihoods with crops that are kind to the earth and that are more suited for the soil in their region. So it's been a wonderful learning curve. In parts of Africa, we also work with women who are taking care of baby elephants who are injured and hurt, because the elephants have a strong role to play in the ecosystem of the land as well. And so our funds go to hire more women to care for these elephants that impact the environment as well. So it's a multi-pronged approach. You know, in the Philippines, we work with NGOs that help women grow organic fruit and vegetables as a solution to overfishing, because in the Philippines, we have so much coral and wildlife destroyed by dynamite fishing and just different kind of erosions in those parts. So just trying to find ways to prepare women for the changes in the climate, which are inevitable. You know, as you know, it's our biggest challenge in terms of humanity coming up, much more than the coronavirus pandemic, and just to try to future-proof them while helping them build their livelihoods and being kind to the earth.
So we're looking forward to being able to organize a WOMAG collaboration with Christine and planning one of these expeditions for our members. But Christine, let me transition, and I want you to be ready to ask your questions or put them in the chat. I'll come to you shortly. But Christine, one of the things that I'm really amazed at how you've been able to take, you know, you've been a very purpose-driven person that I've known for many years, but you take it not just in the NGO and volunteer work that you're doing with Women on a Mission and Her Planet Earth, but even in your choice of the work projects, you've been very deliberate at looking at the ones that really tackle the passions you have on women empowerment and sustainability. And the most recent one, of course, is the launch of Eat Just here in Singapore. Do you want to tell us about that? How did you get involved with them? Or should we actually, let's show the video quickly just to remind people what we're talking about in case you missed it. Jocelyn, can you play the video? We'll just do 1 minute of this. And
a restaurant in Singapore has become the first ever to sell chicken made in a laboratory. The cultured meat, which was approved by Singapore's food agency earlier this month, was an ingredient in chicken nuggets. The restaurant's owner described it as a revolutionary step towards solving climate change and creating the opportunity to feed the world without overwhelming the planet.
Thank you. Just wanted you to get a feel for the launch and particularly that immersive experience for those who were lucky enough. I think Steve's time's there. Maybe you got to see that in at 1880. But how did you get involved with Just and maybe Christine talk more about this project and some of the ones and your focus on cellular agriculture right now?
Yeah. So, the interesting thing with having these two NGOs, which are all volunteer based, so we don't pay ourselves, whatever we raise, we donate. It has opened many doors of opportunity for me over the years, I have to say, and I do get approached by different groups to work as a consultant. So I've set up my consultancy. For 5 years, I was working with Temasek Trust, the philanthropic arm of Temasek as well, helping them with different philanthropic projects. And then Just actually contacted me out of the blue last October even, and I didn't even know which company it was. They weren't telling me. It came through a friend of mine in Hong Kong. And they said, Christine, we're looking for someone to host these special dinners. And I can't tell you too much. It's an alternative protein. And so I thought it's probably another plant-based. So I had to sign an NDA, and then I met the whole team on Zoom. They interviewed me, and I realized, wow, this is something different. This is real meat made from cells, grown in the lab. Although we don't want to say in the lab, we call it cultured meat or clean meat. And it's a world first, because at the time we were still waiting for the government of Singapore to approve the sale of such a meat. They had been talking to the Singapore government for 2 years, providing the science, checking the safety, the cell line, everything. And so we wanted to be ready in parallel for when the approval came on Thanksgiving in November. They got the approval, and then we were ready to launch those immersive dinners in the middle of a pandemic with only 5 people allowed per group. So that was really interesting to run these events, over the last few months with the restrictions, the safety measures in place, the masks, me telling that story, explaining how everything is made, hosting people, from stakeholders, investors and government agencies and influencers, different people, to really explain to them. Because that's the big challenge with cultured meat, is to tell that story, to make them understand that it's safe, it's the future of food in many ways. It can go hand in hand, of course, with plant-based. And this company also has a plant-based product called Just Egg. So they have 2 brands, Just and Good. Just is all their plant-based, which has the monk bean based egg, which is very successful. And we'll be selling more of that out of Singapore soon, because they're building a plant. And then the good brand is all the cultured meat that will be coming through, and it starts with chicken, but they will also be bringing out beef and pork. And it's really an exciting time, because Singapore looked at the science and said, we want to try this. It's in line with our 30% of producing 30% of food by 2030. And so many other ways that have been highlighted, during the pandemic, the food security issue, and even just being kinder to nature, because as you know so well, you guys from being at WOMAG and part of this community around sustainability, that our current food system is not sustainable, the way we're consuming meat especially.
Yeah, so many of us are involved, I think, in the UN food systems dialogue right now and working on this. So I wanted to and is it available right now? Because I know you launched in 1880 and you were doing a Deliveroo partnership.
Yeah, so the Deliveroo partnership is still happening, very limited quantities and a little bit restricted in terms of who can order, depending on where you're based geographically. But we will be restarting, hopefully, the immersive dining experience that you just saw, and trying to open some of those spots to the public. So I'll keep you posted, Elizabeth, when that is confirmed to happen. We're trying to see with the restrictions when that can happen, again, even if it's in smaller groups, because it's, there's nothing better to do than, of course, trying it and seeing the experience and tasting it. It tastes delicious. It just tastes like meat, but it's good meat, guilt-free. So it's been really fun working with them. Actually, they're a fantastic team, and it's a very hopeful project, because it's offering a real solution to some of the issues we're having with livestock, using one third of the land around the world. We're using 1/3 of the agriculture around the world to feed these kind of, to grow crops to feed the livestock. So as I'm sure some of you know.
Thanks, Christine. And I think we're planning a WOMAG meal on a mission, and I hope that we can incorporate some of those ingredients into the meal. I'm starting to get questions, so let's switch gears. And Gina, I think you have a question for Christine, and wanted to know if you wanted to ask her in person, or otherwise we'll take your question on the chat.
Yeah, sure. I could ask in person. Yes, because I really love the idea, of the woman on mission, the 1.5 million ways. I think that's incredible. So I'm just wondering, besides passion, how do you get people on board? How do you engage them to come on board your mission? What would you think is the top 3 things that work to onboard more people onto your mission? Yeah, I mean, we all have passion, but how do we spread it out, right? Yeah, that would be.
So I think I've been very lucky because we have wait lists of women wanting to come on our treks, and I actually have more demand than supply. So I have, obviously the list of people who come on the trek and they recommend it to their friends. It's all word of mouth. I interview them, make sure, we're in line with the reasons why we're doing this, obviously. So I haven't had to promote it. People, of course, we do PR around it. I write about the treks that we've been on. I get a chance to talk about them in panels like this, obviously, and that is usually how I get then people contacting me and say, Christine, I'd love to join. This makes, this sounds like a wonderful opportunity to have a life-changing adventure, but also doing good and helping other women. So I can't say that I've had to promote it because it's really bespoke, right? So we're not really trying to go mass. It's really about building those special relationship with a small team of people. As I said, the women that come on my treks are just such beautiful souls, and it's been one of the highlights for me these last 9 years is to getting to know this group of women that have become my sisterhood, really. So I haven't
passion,
yeah,
purpose driven like you, and all that. That's I think what you find out when you meet them. So
I think just to finish that question is, I think if you're trying to promote people to join, you just have to be an active advocate, and speak your truth. Why are you doing what you do? And people can see through that right away. What are you doing? Are your actions aligned with your values and not the other way around? And I think that's really part of building your own personal brand. People will follow you to the end of the world if you're really, kind of honest with why you're doing what you're doing. And of course, it takes a lot of hard work and organization because they trust you with their life as well.
Thanks, Christine. And I think Erin has a question on cellular agriculture. Erin? Do you want to ask, or do you want
Yes, sure, thank you. And Elizabeth, just wanted to also flag that Janissa had another question about her planet Earth. So if you wanted to take that one first and then we transition to cellular agriculture, that's fine with me.
Okay, up to you guys. So what's the question about her planet Earth?
Sorry.
That's the first question.
Oh, I missed that one at the top, sorry.
Oh, I see. Is it in the chat? Is that the one?
Yeah. What are the different ways that you can get? Where's Janissa? Sorry.
Hi.
Go ahead, Janissa.
Yeah, Christine.
Hi, Janissa. How are you?
So, I'm good. And thanks so much. It was really nice to hear your stories. I just wanted to add on to Gina's question because, Gina, you're asking about individuals partnering. But I'm just also thinking people here are also in organizations. We're part of women's groups. Like, how can we possibly look to having our organizations or these groups partner with Her Planet Earth to scale up your efforts in any way?
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you so much. So that's really a really good one, because obviously a lot of our activities were around expeditions and events. So we're also trying to find other ways to connect, and because we've had the request for more women wanting to be engaged with this movement, so of course, we could definitely be speaking separately with volunteers who want, because I also work with a few NGOs that I funnel a lot of my volunteers through them. So like, for example, in Singapore, Zero Waste SG, I'm on the board of Zero Waste SG, a wonderful NGO here that is trying to fight the use of single-use plastic. And so we do funnel volunteers there, but the real work has to be done in the field in terms of Her Planet Earth, meaning coming on our trips, raising funds for the charity partners that we work with, coming and understanding the issues that women face, and hopefully that will open up again in the next couple of years, or this year, hopefully. We have a great trip coming up to restore coral in the Philippines. It's with a partner that we have in Palawan. It's hands-on restoration, work with coral. So I think just I think if you're keen to find out more and to get involved, the best is to just connect with me after, and I think Elizabeth will share that. And depending on when the projects come up, obviously, then I will definitely involve some of the volunteers to partner with me on different initiatives, because we have so many coming up actually.
Yes, and Yosika had a question about those crisis moments. Yosika?
Yeah, just because it's a really interesting story, and I see that you see like life and death kind of crisis. So I'm just wondering, like, how did participants react to that? I mean, they are panic, of course, etc. But like closing. I mean, and at the end of the trip, like how do they feel, and what learnings do they take from that? It's like, are they still eager for more expeditions, or I don't know.
It's a great question. It's a great. So I've had a range of reactions, obviously, and sometimes basically we are taking women outside of the comfort zone, okay? And some more extreme expeditions. Some expeditions are more extreme than others. Some basic comments that I've had, during expeditions when I call it type 2 fun. Type 1 fun is just fun and it's comfortable. Everybody wants to do it again. Type 2 fun, there are definitely moments that are pretty miserable, but at the end, we're so proud of ourselves and we've achieved something. We've pushed ourselves. Type 3 fun is just miserable, forever, and nobody wants to do it again. So I'm hoping that obviously my expeditions are more towards the type 2 fun, because if it's not a little bit uncomfortable, you don't grow. And that's really the basic. I'm not interested in just taking a group of women to have an easy walk in the park. I want people to feel uncomfortable and to really push themselves. And on top of that, we're fundraising. We have a mission. We have a team target. I never put limits. We always have a team target, and we always manage to get there somehow. It's a real team effort. So I think when we have situations that are a little bit scary, which has happened a few times, you see the range of reactions, but we often pull through, and that's why that preparation before is so important. That we're not putting a bunch of strangers together. These are women that have been in touch even virtually for close to a year, that have been preparing mentally and emotionally for this expedition, which is so important when things don't go as planned. And where we help each other, we support each other. We, when some of us are not feeling well, I've had those moments where I've been sick too, throwing up and just miserable, and my teammates pull and help me, and so I think that what comes out of that is that, yes, you feel alive when you are in these situations that really test you in so many ways. And that's where you grow. You come back a different person. And I think that's the whole point. I want them to be transformational within a safe range, of course. But there are, of course, moments where, you're really a little bit afraid sometimes. I go on some of these trips with a tiny bit of reservation every time. And if I don't have that feeling, then I don't want to go.
I wonder what Steve thinks every time you go.
So Steve, my husband's used to this, obviously, and he does feel more relaxed by the fact that I'm organizing it. He knows I'm a good organizer. And so when I'm in charge of the evacuation, exit strategy, or, safety measures, so he knows firsthand that I'm involved with that planning. When we were in Jordan one time, we also had one of our teammates whose dad was CIA, and he was on hand if anything happened, so there's all sorts of situations that you will find that we have a lot of resources in other ways, not just with the people who organize my trips, but we have, we find that the partners are extremely supportive to partners of these women, and everybody's all hands on deck in support in some way. But we try to stay, of course, on the safe side of things.
Cynthia, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so I look forward to my application, because this is exactly my kind of trip. But I'm really curious that obviously there's a huge amount of excitement that builds up in people ahead of the trips. And how have you, as a leader, been helping people through that when obviously I imagine there's been lots of delays and things like that?
Yeah, so actually I had to cancel 4 expeditions when the pandemic hit. We were supposed to be with Women on a Mission. I had a trip to Kyrgyzstan, which was already full, 12 women registered, deposits paid. And so we are still going to go do that. We've met a couple times, and discussed that, and we're going to go next year, hopefully. I had a trip to Antarctica planned with a wonderful explorer called Ben Saunders. He's one of my personal heroes. So that has been delayed, but we're also planning to go. So, I mean, obviously, this is out of my control. And when travel resumes, we'll be doing that. I still have all the WhatsApp groups. We're still in touch. People are, and I give them the option, of course, to get their deposits back and cancel. But everybody wants to go. Everybody wants to go and is ready to travel when things open up. And even though people's careers have probably shifted or plans have changed, I've gotten involved with different startups since the change with the onset of the pandemic. So I'm also quite busy. But I do think travel will come back, but it will probably be a little bit different. So I probably won't have as many. I'm going to space them out a little bit. I might do 1 a year or 2 a year maximum, because it's also potentially more environmentally respectful, in terms of the CO2 emissions. But I will make them count more, meaning more planning around it, more impact, making sure we connect more locally, that we have a bit more time to absorb the learning, and planning fundraising events, have always taken a lot of time. And so having a bit more time to do those trips very well, but maybe having them, less often, I think would be smarter to do. So that's my plan at the moment, because I have quite a few other projects I'm excited about too, that I want to devote my time and attention to. But travel will come. And I think that the meaningful travel that has impact in local communities will be in demand.
Yeah.
So we just need to make sure that our expeditions are really worth it, that if we're going to get on a plane and do what we're going to do, that it has the positive repercussions that we want, and that we really impact local community and support them and continue that work even when we get back. So that's just made me reassess how to prepare that and how to maintain those relationships better.
Thanks, Christine. Right. And maybe go back to Erin. You had originally asked a question, and back to Singapore on Cellular Ag.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And Christine, thank you so much for your really interesting sharing. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about where you see some of the challenges actually in convincing consumers to buy into something like the Eat Just and other kinds of alternative meats.
Yes, no, that's a great question. And obviously, this is a big part of the work that needs to be done for a lot of these brands, coming on the market, that it's a product, first of all, that's safe, that's clean, that's ethical. So even with cellular agriculture, they're working to use plant serum instead of animal serum. I don't know if some of you have read this, but this at the moment, a cultured meat is grown in animal serum. This is what is approved by the government here in Singapore, but they have the capacity to use plant serum, which ultimately is the goal, because you want it to be really to be ethical. And I think the biggest challenge for consumers is especially around cultured meat, which for a lot of people still seems like sci-fi, even though it's a technology that has existed since the 60s even. It is to really make them understand that it's a safe product. It's actually, so my part of my job is to explain how it's made, and it's really fascinating. They take one cell from a chicken in California called Ian. Actually, Ian is the original chicken from Eat Just, who lives in a sanctuary. They didn't even hurt him. They took a feather that dropped from Ian, and they took the DNA from there, the cell from there. They put it in a clean, sterile environment, a bit like the system that's around the brewing of beer, in a big metal vat. They feed it the nutrients and vitamins and minerals and all that, and then it duplicates and creates a sort of mincemeat that is then real meat. And it's much cleaner because there's no antibiotics. We haven't cut down any forest. So I do believe it's a real solution, but there's a lot of work around the storytelling and the marketing and explaining that this is something that we're planning to scale, and it will become something normal in the future. It will become something that when you walk into a supermarket, you'll have the option of getting, maybe your grass-fed meat, and then you'll have your cultured meat. And then people will make those choices because a lot of people still want meat. The demand for meat is still there. And so, they just don't want, like a lot of us, we don't want to be harming the planet with our consumption, right? So it has been weighing heavily on us, but it just needs to be more mainstream. And so we're a few years away from that. As they scale up, the plan is to scale up and get more countries to give regulatory approval for this kind of meat. And that's going to happen. The Israelis are doing a lot of work in this space as well. There are about 80 companies around the world today working on cultured alternatives, cultured meat. So Eat Just is not one of the only one. It'll take more companies to get into this space to make it more mainstream. So a few years away, but I do think that as our kids grow up, you're going to see that it will be something that's more common in different markets and will be accepted and just part of the options we have, and so much better for the planet.
Thank you, Christine. And I think it's very interesting for those of us, especially who are working on the UN Food Systems Summit, right now, leading up to the summit in September, a lot of these discussions on alternatives, right? That it's not necessarily either or, but it's and, giving us the most options to really put together not a one size fits all, but all of these different options for us to have a more sustainable global food system. So unfortunately, we're at 10:13. I know I have 2 minutes to close. So I wanted to, on behalf of the WOMAG community, thank you, Christine, for making time for us this morning. And for those of you who want to connect with Christine, please, these are her details. You can use LinkedIn or Instagram. She's got a lot more photos from her expeditions on Instagram, and you can do that. Or you can also find out more from her Planet Earth, which is the next one, and of course from WOMAG. And please, if you are the first time joining us, I hope that you will continue. We have another program at the end of the month for you, the F Word, how Gen Z reclaims feminism, and led by Jocelyn Bloss, our very own here at WOMAG. And also on August 4th is our next coffee catch-up, the story of upcycling and women empowerment.